So, oh yes, Pastor Richard. They do. So I'm going to give it back to Devin.
Before I launch the print, turn it on. Can we turn it off? There we go. Before I launch the Prezi, I just wanted to let you know that it'll feel like a whole lot, not much, going through the Prezi itself, but I want you to know that I have a couple of online handouts done in wikis. These are wikis. So we can see examples. My intention is to go through the Prezi fairly quickly and then leave some time to go maybe dig into the sites that I've created for you. So you'll see that both these topics, my little gift to you is that I'll have a range of resources, basically the additional information about using these tools in a classroom setting. So just so you think, as I go through the Prezi, that I'm not giving you much of anything. It's out there. We can talk about. It's there forever and ever for you. So that said. So I will be talking about ways of blogs and wikis in the classroom. The special challenge that the organizing committee gave to me is I'm probably close expert on one of them. I know it very well. I am obsessed about it, but I don't actually use it in class. So that would be a little bit of a challenge. The other one I actually use on a fairly regular basis as a major portion of my instructional practice. I use it for group work. So my special little challenge is, as I talk to you about blogs, in particular, it'll be at a little bit more theoretical level from a classroom standpoint, because I have not yet actually incorporated them into my classes. Others in the room have, so there's more insider status on that. But let's talk about blog. When you think of blog, what is a blog? Do you then have a blog? Okay. Excellent. I need your RSS feed, so I have yours. You read blogs. How do you read blogs? Blogs are a tremendous resource, and in terms of providing up-to-date information, different perspectives on a range of topics, any topic you teach on, there are blogs with people with various levels of expertise who actually write about those topics. I can guarantee you that. A blog is it's basically an online, web-based journal, a place for online writing and interaction. It started a couple decades ago, maybe not quite that long ago, as online web blogs. That's where the name blog came from. Web blogs. Primarily used for people to write about things they cared about, things they're passionate about, sharing their thoughts and photos and kind of on a personal basis. They have evolved to a range of professional uses, but the idea is it's an ongoing blog writing provided in chronological posts. They appear in reverse chronological order. So if you go to a blog, the most recent post always appears at the top. And then they kind of scroll down based upon when they were actually written. Usually texts. They're primarily text-based formats, although increasingly as the other technologies become more user-friendly and more accessible, you'll see people insert images, you'll see people insert video. Some blogs are exclusively images and some are exclusively video. I follow in my RSS feed several photographers, and some of those photographers, their blog entries are photos. Sometimes with little text, sometimes with no text. So while it's primarily a text-based medium, it doesn't have to be. It can be a really fairly rich kind of environment in which to write and work. I've tried to do a little bit more of inserting images into my blogs and occasionally doing some videos, and just to introduce a little bit more interactivity with my readers. They will generally have a way to subscribe, so that you can subscribe via an RSS feed. How many know the RSS feed? You know what that is? Okay. Well, at some point we'll show you RSS feed, but basically, the blog gives you an option. You've seen a little orange signal with kind of Wi-Fi signal. That's a way to subscribe to an RSS feed. So the beauty of that, whether it's via RSS or email, is that you don't have to go out to these blogs and see if there's something new posted. If you subscribe via one of these vehicles, that information comes to you either via email or via your RSS feed. So I love that because I subscribe to several blogs and I would basically do nothing else all day. If I spent the day surfing around, checking out the blogs I want to follow, it comes to me. They are topical. Generally, there will be a point of view, maybe a specific area of interest that they write about or they talk about. It can be more institutional. It may be highly personal, sometimes very, very personal. But there is a perspective and a focus of the blog. They are social in that the default is to allow comments, so that as you write a post, you're generally inviting people to read it and comment, so that they can provide feedback, you can comment back to them, and you can carry on a fairly, hopefully rich conversation about what you have written and shared. Some blogs you will see just vast numbers of comments, and it's an engaging conversation that the writer of the blog post created, and then inviting people to come in and talk about it. Sometimes you'll just get little bits of feedback here and there. My primary blog, I don't get a lot of comments on the blog itself, but a lot of commenting happens on Twitter. That's where the people I interact with on boards tend to respond. We have some great conversations on Twitter based upon what I'm inviting them to talk about in my blog post. I tried to do a bit of research just because I didn't want to embarrass myself up here, but also I was just interested. And I tried to pull out some examples of the ways in which educators use blogs in or outside of their classroom. Some of these may be kind of interesting to you, not from the perspective of I can invite my students to do this, but this might be a way for me to communicate and create my own voice and extend my own voice. Stan this morning shared in the Twitter feed a great article that talks about a common theme that I'm seeing more and more, the notion of academics needing to step out of that academic environment and talking to each other in foreign languages that no one else understands, and using blogs to communicate about their work, reaching those out in the community, however your community is defined, and talking about and sharing about what your particular expertise areas are. Blogs are a great way to do that. So, speaking of, this is the front page of a blog by he's a faculty member, I don't remember exactly where. By the way, in the Prezi, all these links work. I won't go into them right now, but if you go to the presentation, there's a link on the resources page. You can go there and visit those blogs. This is an individual who has completed his PhD, and he is teaching somewhere. I don't remember exactly where. And if you'll notice here, he has set up pages within his blog. He writes about his topic of expertise, but he also has pages where he has links to information about the research he's done and is doing, the projects he's working on, links to publications, presentations, podcasts, and videocasts. So basically, this is kind of a personal, professional web page in addition to his blog. It's a great way for him to share in a variety of settings and tool formats the research that he has done for sharing knowledge. And this is actually the front page of my blog. I do the academic thing. I'm likely never going to be in a tenure track position where I have to publish. I do have a book chapter in press. It'll hopefully come out in a couple months. But my interest is not in talking to other academics necessarily. It is sharing my knowledge about nonprofit governance with nonprofit boards, with executive directors, and with others who engage in work related to nonprofit boards. So this is my way This is my way of engaging and sharing information, sharing my knowledge with the audience that I feel really would benefit from it most. I do the academic thing, but as an adjunct, you know, this is where my area of interest is in terms of getting to the people who will use it. Here's an example of a blog that's inviting conversation. You've probably heard of Prof Hacker. They write, you know, they have writers who write about a range. This is attached to the Chronicle of Higher Education, and you know, they write about, you know, the posts are really informative and they're valued. You just go there and want to read about a better blogging assignment, and yes, there's a link to this one in the resources I give you. But what this blog does really well is it invites conversation. Faculty go there to engage with the author and with each other. And I didn't show you the conversation itself, but this blog in particular is especially effective at getting people to talk about a topic of common interest. This is an example of a student. You can also do that if you're a faculty member and engaging ethically, setting ethical issues aside, but particularly doctoral students are exploring the way of using blogs to reflect upon their research and talking about the graduate experience. And so maybe not necessarily, like this entry, this recent entry, she's not talking about the research itself, but she's talking about that doctoral student experience. And I actually became acquainted with her and several others. I found a PhD chat, which is doc students, primarily in Europe, who get together and talk about what common doc students concern. And one of the great areas of great interest amongst this group is how can we use blogs to talk about that graduate student experience, both for you personally, you know, as a reflective process, but also in sharing that process with others. I might also mention that as I was finishing my dissertation, and I just discovered blogging, and this blogging is the one thing that I leaped into the chance to do this when Chrissy made me. But I was learning about blogging and reading blogs, and I encountered a woman, I can't find it now anymore, but her entire dissertation, I'm sure a physical copy exists somewhere else, but her entire dissertation was available on her blog. She used her blog to share every chapter, every piece of her dissertation, and it was publicly available on a blog. So yeah, extremely, extremely powerful. So maybe the takeaway from this kind of abstract portion of this is that there's great potential for you and your students in terms of sharing information, connecting with others who have that interest, and really engaging in ways that are valuable to you and others. And this is actually an example of a blog that is a class blog. I have some links in there that will show. One of the challenges of showing you examples from a classroom setting is frequently those blogs are password protected, which means I couldn't go out and find them via the range of search mechanisms I tried to use as I prepared for this. This is a good example of one that was publicly available. And this particular blog was, I believe it was more students sharing their experiences and reflecting publicly together. But again, I have links to several blogs from this particular faculty members' classes that show you how blogs can be used for students to engage and write. Let's talk about, you know, as I was reading and exploring, there were some fairly common themes in terms of those who do write who have written about how they use blogs in their classroom. So I can't show you examples necessarily, but I can give you some of the common themes I've noticed. They use blogs to create content. Their students come together in the blog environment, write posts, create content. They do the research, they summarize it in some format that is useful to their audience, and they actually create the content themselves. They use it to share knowledge. They interact in the discussions. They share in that creating content. They share links to information. They basically can use a blog as a way to share information and share knowledge and expand the group's collective knowledge about the topic at hand. Blogs can be a place for them to reflect publicly, and maybe literally publicly. It may be reflecting in the safe environment of their password-protected student blog, but to be able to sit back, write about, and reflect upon what they're learning, what kind of struggles they're having in the class. If you remember that, the example I showed you, I think it showed someone talking about the experience of doing a presentation in class. So a place where they can reflect upon, develop a reflective practice, and reflect upon what they're learning, and do that in either really publicly, if it's a public blog, or within that space, publicly being in the classroom environment. Blogs can be used to encourage critical thinking. You can post blogs and asking students to really think about a topic and debate it and talk about the different perspectives. You can then encourage them to think critically and talk about that in the comments that they write, and encourage them to just keep digging deeper and deeper in terms of critical analysis of what was shared, what was presented, and what was happening in their comments. To engage peers. One of the things I'm actually considering as I rework my classes is incorporating a blog as a way for them to provide that information and then engage their peers in discussion. So you would have a student or a small group of students write a blog post on a topic sharing information, and then have them engage their students via the comment section in talking about what they have shared. And then finally, this can be a safe place for them to think about and develop their public persona. Unless they are living under a rock, at some point in their public lives, their professional lives, they will have an online presence. It may be a LinkedIn account, it may be participating in writing a blog, it may be engaging in online forums. This can be a place for them to really begin thinking about how do I want to present myself as a person in a public setting in this kind of online environment. And this can be, I know I struggled a little bit with this early on, finding my online voice. And this can be a place where they get practice and learn to develop that online persona. I did mention that I have this online resource, and I won't step out the Prezi now, but we can go back there. It's on the resources page, and it's also embedded. This is a working link actually in the Prezi itself, so if you go either way, you can get to that. Let's talk about the other topic. I was kidding to read my bad karma, resolve my bad karma, as I have to talk about wikis for the rest of my life. I have a love-hate relationship with wikis. I've come to realize that wikis can be an incredibly rich place to create content to share with others. For example, these online handouts. It can be a rich place to engage students in collaborative learning. It can be a place for them to create content and share with others. But as I will be sharing momentarily, it has its own little perks. But wikis are basically an online web page, and a place where you can create a web page, create links to a web page, create a site like the one I created for this online handout, and it can be a collaborative place to work. And in terms of the way I use it in my classrooms, it is a place where my students do their group work, where they come together, they engage in this space and create something collaborative. They can do it because it's web-based. Anywhere you have a web connection and can get to the wiki space, you can contribute to it. In terms of group work, it is not immune to the usual kinds of group anxieties and group challenges. And I will say it is a far better environment than where I have been having the students do the group work, but it's still occasionally, it can be a rocky road, particularly about the middle of the semester. And sometimes, and my Wiki scars is, this happened this last semester. It was ugly. I still carry the burns from it. You know, it's just a way to say that any of these tools can be very powerful. None of them are perfect. None of them are perfect. And so wikis, if you go into a wiki, using Wiki in a group environment in classroom, just know that it has its ups and downs as well. But I will say that I tried other ways of engaging group students across the miles, and it's very imperfect, but it's still very powerful and far better than anything I've used before. Let me talk a little bit about how I do use my wikis in the classroom. My classes are survey classes within political science. My direction from the department is cover a lot of ground. And so like a typical survey class, we talk about many different topics at a very superficial level. So they get kind of a taste of topics ranging from philanthropy to nonprofit governance to human resources to financial management. They get an introduction to all these topics, but at a very, very superficial level. So I have used my group projects to allow students and invite students to explore one tiny little sliver of that at a deeper level. The grounding for this is a theory called engagement theory, which is, if you teach online, you really need to Google that and find that. And I actually have a link to that too. But where the premise of engagement theory is that students find creating new content more meaningful if they are creating it for others. So it's not a paper they write, turn it into being grade and then no one ever sees it. That they are creating something that will be seen by others, whether it's being seen by their peers or whether it's being seen by the whole world. There is value, according to this theory, in students knowing that what they're creating something that someone else will find useful. So I've incorporated group work in all of my classes since almost the beginning, inviting them to work together to create something that will be shared in the class with my fall class, and so they're creating a lesson for their peers. And in the spring class, they work in groups to create a shared space as a resource for nonprofit practitioners. So the end product in the spring class, the end product is an online lesson that they create, a rich and multimedia lesson that they share with their peers and teach to their peers, and then facilitate a discussion based upon that lesson that they created. The fall class, the entire class creates a website built in the Wiki where they share a resource that will be useful to their target audience as a rural nonprofit practitioner. So there's an internal audience for the fall class and a global audience for the spring class. And engagement theory is the purpose. I will say, I don't have it built into this elsewhere, but students won't frequently talk about this in evaluations, but when they do, it is routinely positive. And I don't mind for this kind of commentary, but they will frequently say, I appreciated this, because it's important to me that someone else is going to see the results of my efforts. And whether it was teaching their peers or whether it was printed to a public audience, the unsolicited comments that I do get are routinely positive about, yes, that was something that was meaningful to students. As I mentioned, by the power of them having to create something to share with others on a smaller subset of what we're teaching, they get to go a little bit deeper. They get to become our class experts on their group's chosen topic. So, you know, they may know a little bit about a whole lot of things at the end of the class, but in one particular area, one particular topic area, they get a stronger depth of knowledge because they're having to research and explore and synthesize and summarize and create something. And in the process, they're learning more deeply about their assigned topic. There's value. I use these to, particularly in the fall class, give them a chance to learn by teaching. And they do comment on this as well, in not, you know, in a place that's solicited for this kind of comment, but the comment will be that in creating the lesson and then facilitating the discussion, the groups develop a discussion question, and they lead that discussion for that week. They get to learn a little bit more deeply because they get to think about what they created to respond to the questions and comments that their peers provide. They may get to pull out, you know, a resource that they discovered in their research and use that to, you know, to answer a question in a discussion. They get to learn by teaching, basically. There's also the necessary evil component of this, in that the likelihood that they will be collaborating online at some point in their work lives, it's inevitable, and if they haven't already, this can be one semi-safe way to experience that online experience of collaborating with people from a distance. As you can imagine, that's where the tricky stuff comes in. Things I do to support the work, these groups, I tend to stay at the sidelines because the real value comes in them getting into the messy stuff and doing it themselves. But I do provide a range of supports to kind of help facilitate the process. One, this is actually, the sound isn't attached, but I do a video overview. I introduce them to the Wiki environment. I show them how it works. There's something about seeing it that helps some students, because the Wiki can be a pretty scary place. You open it up and there's this big blank page, and you know it's a web page and you don't know anything about web design and you're scared to death. And just being in the Wiki environment can be very intimidating to people. So this is actually, and it's running, but it's me walking through and talking about the assignment. As I'm giving them a tour of the Wiki environment, I'm also reinforcing those kinds of things that I need for them to be thinking about as they begin to do this group work. So I'm both showing them the space they will be working in, and I'm also reinforcing those kinds of tips and musts and things they need to know via my narrative. And that, I have found that the video, like the audio I discussed yesterday, there's something about it. The video will help some students in ways that me describing in the syllabus or me describing an email doesn't. This is a help to some students. I do have that embedded in the Wiki handout, so you can watch it. It's really ugly because it's just me jabbering about the assignment. But the other thing I do is, before this opens up, I create a brainstorming page for each group. One, so that they don't get to that truly blank page and be completely stifled before we get started. The other is that I want them to get used to coming to that space. One of the big issues that I repeatedly ran into before using wikis is they would email, I would set up a thread discussion, and they wouldn't know where to find the discussion, so they start emailing people, and of course they leave out a group member and wonder why that group member wasn't doing his or her part of the work, and they do chat at times that, you know, people couldn't participate. If there's one value of doing this in a wiki, it's that this is a space you do the work. There is no other space. This is where you do the work. So everyone is equally accountable. They can't say, I didn't know, I wasn't copying on the email. This is where you work. So I create this page to reinforce that, give them a place to get started. And I also encourage them to use this brainstorming page to start talking about what they might want to do, sharing some resources. Part of that is just starting the group process, but also a part of it is getting them to start using the Wiki environment in a place before they start creating something that someone else is going to see. I strongly encourage them, and some will resist, but encourage them to get in, edit, give it a try, start talking about it here, and get a sense of how the Wiki works. This isn't possible in the fall class because these group lessons there are rolling deadlines and they happen quickly, and it'll just be more frightening to everyone than it's worth. But in the spring class, where there is an end product at the end of the semester, I give them benchmarks. You know, by this day, I want to see an outline. By this benchmark, I want to see some pages up. By this benchmark date, we're going to do a week of peer review. This helps keep people moving along. Students, you know, there will always be students who, because of life circumstances or because that's just where they are or whatever, if I don't give them this, they will wait until the last minute to check in and say, hi guys, you know, a week before the assignment is due, and before I enter the benchmarks, this did happen. They're accountable for being in there and moving this forward in a way that will result in hopefully a better group experience and a better end product. I give them a style sheet. The style sheet is embedded in my wiki on Wikis because if you don't, they will find every funky color. They will find every weird type, and it will just be an unreadable mess. So I do give them a style sheet even for the fall class, which isn't public, just because I want it to be a readable. People shouldn't get tripped up by the weird quirks of how because students aren't necessarily trained in web design. And so they do whatever looks cool, and they don't necessarily do it, use principles that are reader friendly. And then I do what I can to support the community aspect. My personal theory on this is that my job, the group stuff, is part of the learning experience. So I let them know up front, and we reinforce along the way. I know it's messy. It's supposed to be messy. It'll probably get ugly at some point. Stick through it so that they know that I know that it's going to be hard at times. I don't step in unless things just really totally fall apart, because I want them to figure out and work out that stuff themselves. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever had to intervene. I will counsel from the sidelines and guide the groups and offer advice, but part of the learning process, part of that online good for you lesson, they need to figure out how to work that out themselves. Many frustrations. Some of them inevitable, some of them easy to handle, some of them just maddening. For some students, it is impossible to give them too much information. They don't want to know that you want links. They want to know how many links, in what format, from what sites, on what topic, you know, and they will be unhappy with you through most of the semester because they need that certainty of knowing exactly what you want to do so they can get the A. And of course, that is not the point of this lesson. The point of this lesson is for them to go out and research and explore, for them to make those decisions. I give them some guidelines so we don't just get a PowerPoint slapped up in the wiki. I give them, you know, like, you need to explore these topics, you need to provide these kinds of links to resources. But it's up to them. That's part of the learning process. But there will be students who will be unhappy with me till the grades come out because I can't give them enough information. The wiki environment can be an intimidating space. Students have different levels of experience, and it's not necessarily the students you think will have trouble with this. It's frequently the 20-year-olds. It's the adult students just figure out, I have to do this, I'll make it work, But for students at different walks of life, the wiki environment is different. and it's scary, and they will forever, they will continue to be kind of intimidated just by the fact that they have to do it in this wiki. This is the part where I'm kind of thinking about at least one of those assignments, maybe moving to a blog, just because a blog is a little less, there are fewer variables in terms of creating content. Groups can be transient. Those of you who teach online know that people come and go. They literally come and go. Different people will be inactive, and which means a greater impact on group members who are present. I try to set up the groups. I set them up large enough, particularly for the fall class, where it's a semester-long project, where it's big enough so that to account for someone will be inactive and someone may leave. Occasionally, you will have group build just info, and it's just all the students who are going to exit the class that semester are in that particular group. And it can be really challenging. This last time, I had a couple of groups who were down to 2 people, and the people who dropped very late in class, so they couldn't redistribute. And so there was some incomplete sections because the people doing that work, people who were entrusted to do the work, disappeared 2 weeks before class ended. So that can be really challenging, more stressful for the students. I'm kind of like, it happens, we'll deal with it. But it's extremely stressful on the students. Copyright concerns. I try to do what I can to reinforce to them awareness and provide them with resources, be aware of copyright concerns, to help them avoid doing something bad. But those concerns are always out there. And one of the reasons I'm just still stunned by this last group, among many reasons, is there was some serious stuff out there that I just have real concerns about how it's presented, and I just don't feel comfortable making it live. And speaking of that, when I started this, back, I don't know, almost at the beginning of that time, I had this grand vision. In my classes, the groups are going to create chapters, interactive chapters, that would contribute from year to year to an online rural nonprofit management handbook. It was going to be this marvelous resource that nonprofit practitioners will flock to the world over to gather this information and learn and benefit, and they'll be so impressed by what's happening at the University of Wyoming. The reality is, these projects are created in one semester, by students with different levels of interest in the topic, commitment to the class, comfort with the technology, and the end product. I have a couple samples I'll show you. They're out there, all the public ones are out there, but I don't actually necessarily brag about them. And that's something I've had to learn to get over. Because my grand plan didn't fit student reality. And then, of course, the group work, when you put it in an online setting, the anxiety just increases exponentially. You have those group concerns that are exist at a greater level than in a setting where they can see each other and speak face to face. If you do decide to explore using a wiki in a group project, my first bit of advice would be to be absolutely clear about why. What is your instructional goal? What do you want this project to accomplish? And why does the wiki seem to be an appropriate place for this to happen? It looks cool. It looks fun. Is not a good reason. I mean, you really need to be clear about what I'm going to try to do with this project, and is the wiki environment the place to do it? And I'm not ready to abandon it, but it does have some kind of limits. Understand your students and their commitment to the class and to the content. I think that one of my ongoing challenges is that my classes are elected for everyone, so no one in my classes are preparing to be nonprofit managers. They range from you know, I'm interested, I've had some nonprofit experience, I'm interested in exploring more, to, I'm a public sector employee, this is in the public administration program. I work with nonprofits, nonprofits, where that, let me just check it out, to, this is the only class that's open line registered. So, they are not terribly committed, their commitment to my class is not as high as it would be if it were in their major field. And the closest, because I've only taught these classes, I don't have an instructional comparison, but I do from a student standpoint. In my doctoral program, the class that Christy taught, she stretched us. She stretched us to the point of, you know, that to almost breaking. But we were willing to go wherever the wacky place she took us because we were deeply committed to understanding that in the context of our careers. So we were more willing and more able to stretch than I think probably my students are. So just kind of be clear about, you know, how much of a stretch is this going to be, and is this an appropriate stretch? You know, is the stretch this is going to actually help them in some way? Sometimes I'd say yes, sometimes I'd never know. Be prepared to support them in a range of ways. Have very clear expectations for them and for you. And let them know up front that I know it's going to be imperfect. I want you to do your best, but, you know, understand that I know that, you know, have a bottom line. Have a strong stomach and a good sense of humor. And for me, migraine bads can be. And anticipate the group anxieties, because they will happen. And we're actually at the point where we can. Yes?
I don't understand what the anxiety is that you feel as well as the students.
The interpersonal stuff is the big thing. It is a big thing. They don't know how to interact in the environment. So they have the anxiety of, I don't know what a wiki is, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to produce. But there's also the anxiety of, I hate group work. I've been burned. It's amazing to me how 90% of my students say that they're the leaders who will get it done and will be forced to do all this extra work because no one else slacks. There's the anxiety of experiences with group work that they hate, and they know they're going to get burned, and they know it's going to be hard, and they know someone's going to be goofing off, and they're going to be stuck doing all the work. The benchmarks, one of the reasons I have benchmarks that I check as the individual components are great on that one, it's not for the students who would be inclined to slack. Yeah, because, you know, when they see that, oh, I'm going to be checking to see what you're doing at this particular benchmark, some will be maybe encouraged to be more present and be aware that that's happening. The ones who aren't going to do it aren't going to do it anyway. But those benchmarks, frankly, are more for the students who worry about being stuck with all the work, knowing that those other students will be accountable. It's that interpersonal stuff. I think.
Add to that too. I had to participate in a wiki last semester in an online class for collaboration. PBWorks is what we use. And PBWorks, for me, the anxiety for me was I usually end up the leader of the group, like she was talking about, only because all my classmates knew that I'm working in the outreach school and I know a lot about technology. So like the nights I was on the phone with 2 or 3 students for an hour each trying to help them understand the wiki, that takes a lot of my time. The other problem with some of the wikis, like PBWorks, the most frustrating thing or anxiety for me, and I know this about it, is the formatting. She wanted an APA style, but wikis don't necessarily lend themselves to APA style. I mean, you can't get your spacing of your lines correct, or there's a double space here and a triple space there, and you're going, oh my gosh, and you change it, and then you go back and it somehow reverted itself. So there are little quirks, and I think students, if you're more experienced with wikis, you get a little stressed and you're like, oh no, not a wiki, because it won't format right.
Well, and frankly, instructors, if you are doing wiki assignments where you're requiring APA style, you're missing the point. Wiki should be highly interactive. It shouldn't be toss up a term paper online. It is to be interactive. Let me show you a couple examples. This is one from PBWorks, which is what I used to. It's ugly, but the advantage of PBWorks is that it allows them to sort things in folders, and it from an end user standpoint, it actually works out a little bit better. And I don't remember which of these groups work well or are nice. I should have looked at, but see, this is too much text, and they got demons for that. Let me find another group that seems to get it. It's a web page. It's a place to invite interaction and to share rich resources. You should see videos, you should see images, you should see links to other sites. And I'm sorry, I should have looked this up before. See, each of them had a home page, and then we just click through some of these links. I probably picked the wrong one. You know, here are links to original resources. I encourage them to do that, in part for the copyright, but also just to encourage them to introduce people to the range of resources that are out there. They found ways, you know, I will waste a lot of time, but don't ask your students to go to a wiki and write term papers. That is absolutely missing the point. Here's an example from my fall class. Last fall, I moved to Wiki Spaces in part because, it's a little bit less ugly, in part because they started charging educators. And I love my students, but I'm not going to pay money to get them still working Wiki. Although maybe the university, wherever school might buy a site license for that. But that was one of the reasons I moved to Wiki Spaces. This is the assignment that is where they're creating lessons for their peers. And again, I'm flying blind. We'll just pick a page and see. You know, bullet points are fine. I would have liked to have seen something besides bullet points, but the idea being that it's interactive. Take them, find those resources, share those resources, take them to sites where you'll find that other information. That's really the point of a wiki. I mean, it really is, and that's a richer kind of group process. You know, they're sharing, exploring, and thinking about creating something that's web friendly for other users. That's so much better than what I used to get, which was Word documents where group members slapped all the pieces together by something that sounded like 5 different people wrote it, or PowerPoints. PowerPoints that should have been Word documents because they all essentially wrote that Word document and slapped those paragraphs into PowerPoints and then slapped the PowerPoints together. This is a much more user-friendly, media-rich kind of environment for creating things. Let me go to, this is the resource that I created for you. A couple pieces of this would be the lessons learned the hard way. That's kind of my counsel to you, and that is more texting. I just contradicted what I should say. Resources. My permanent gift to you and my ultimate gift to the world is my social bookmarks. And I have over 10,000, yes, I wanted to talk about social bookmarks. And if you want to talk about that later, I'm the person to talk to. These links here will take you to my ongoing collection of bookmarks about the topic. On wikis in general. So there will be a ready access, ready resource of all the things I've been looking for and gathering and sharing with you. The other thing I've shared, here's my style sheet I told you about. So you click there, you can download a copy of the style sheet. Sample benchmarks. Here is that little tour example. And an example, if I use Screener instead of Jane, I just because I discovered Screener first, where I just do a quick 5 minutes, how to turn off the notifications in Wiki. And I just create a little 5-minute video and post it on websites and so lots of great resources there. Other questions? I want to talk about blogs, but I can't tell you how to use them in the classroom. Others in the room may be able to, but I can certainly talk to you about my love of blogs and the power of blogs. other questions? Yes.
Deb, could you, and this is in some ways harkening back to Rick and Hez's presentation too, can you differentiate for me conceptually the work done in the Wiki versus some of the Google applications now? Like I'm just trying to think like the relative advantages and disadvantages of the Wiki versus some of the collaborative tools in Google now.
I'm less familiar with Google Docs from a collaborative standpoint, other than creating common documents. I would say one difference, I don't know about Google Wikis in Google. That's on my to-do list to figure that out. But kind of from a blind standpoint, I would say the Wiki creates a chance for a web-based resource. And where they can create a media-rich, shareable resource that they can share with others. Personal use of wikis, I've become a big user of, I create handouts that, I have one that I did to support a presentation I did for the American Bar Association, and it has now become a fully functioning resource for board presidents. So there is that potential for it to be a broader kind of web, and I'm not saying broader than Google because I don't know who can do in that respect, but a broad kind of shareable web-friendly resource. And again, I don't know what Google can do and can't do. It's really easy to embed things and create links to things and create a more media-rich environment. And again, not saying Google, you can't do that in Google, but that was the reason I turned to a wiki instead, because it's a more interactive kind of environment as they're creating it, and the final product is a little bit more interactive than just writing a Word document and asking people to read it. Just because I don't know the full power of Google Toolbox, I don't know what kind of fair comparison that is. Christy, do you know?
Yeah, a really quick and easy way to think of it is a wiki is a way to create a collaborative web page. Google Doc. I couldn't find one. Here.
Really easy way to think about it is that a wiki is a good way to create a collaborative web page with all of the stuff that a web page can do. And Google Docs is a really good way to create a collaborative document. And I mean, it's just, and exactly what Deb is saying, that if you just think of it kind of that way, that's kind of the way to think of it. It is, a document, if you want the end product to be a document, then Google Docs is the direction. If you want the end product to be a web page. Go ahead, Casey.
Google makes Google Sites, though, so
Yes,
you can have a collaborative web page through Google if you really want to do that.
And maybe the advantage of Google, and I'm thinking about, if the Google, first of all, they may be more familiar with Google products, and Google may be a little less intimidating. There's something about wikis. You still have the blank web page notion, but there's something about the wiki environment that just trips up some students. Most of them get past it, but it just trips up some students. Oh, I did want to show you, I won't ask you to read it now, but I gave you some examples. I just took final reflections from one of my recent classes and just tossed up any comment that referred to the Wiki project. And surprisingly, they really represented a range of kinds of responses I get about this project. The things in green are the things that I picked out that really reflected, were commenting on my instructional goals for the project. So with this one, this person talked about, he or she thought that it's part of learning that you can do this and collaborate, not do it live. I provide the good, the bad, the ugly on this one. Down here, I keep, in this fall class, there are 2 wiki assignments. Everyone does a subsector assignment where they learn about subsector and teach a lesson on that subsector. Later in the semester, the graduate students do one on a nonprofit challenge. They are exactly the same format in terms of how to, because once you get past the anxiety of what's a wiki and how does this work, they can excel and know what's going to happen and relax and do the second one. This comment reiterated, this was a graduate student who said, the first one, the experience was kind of yucky and messy. The second one, people, basically people got it, they understood, they participated, and they didn't have to do so much work. And again, this is a handout format, so more text than I would normally do if I were creating a wiki. But here I love this, and this always happens. This was a special one. This one down. I assigned because people get all and this I know I need to change this, and I'm changing this, but I decided I'm just going to assign topics, and this is one thing I am going to change. But because part of the others was, well, I want that topic, and I didn't get it, and I got my third choice, and so I just assigned topics. The group that was assigned religious organizations, they were all atheists or agnostics, with varying levels of animosity towards organized religion, and they were all stuck just by the magic of linking names down the class roster. They were assigned to do religious organizations. And this was a great comment because, first off, they acknowledged that, well, it wasn't this silly. But then they acknowledged that part of that challenge for them was that they had to go and start from a very naive standpoint. And that turned out to be beneficial for them because they were able to, our lack of knowledge made that information found to be new and useful. So they were forced into this topic, had to go start from scratch because they didn't have a background, and they ended up really engaging and being kind of excited about the topic. So, like I said, that link is there. Read those comments. There's some really great comments. It really is very representative. You'll get the I hate this, I never want to do this again, to this was the best experience of my semester, to okay, I kind of got it. Any other questions or comments? I'm happy to talk to you about wikis, about blogging generally. I will talk to Eric about the social bookmarks too.
I was just going to say, thinking about accessibility stuff from a couple days ago, I was actually wondering if it's possible you could set up a blog and then make students responsible for posting class notes. That seems like a really interesting way to use a blog, and then that would help shift the responsibility to students individually for sort of posting a class set. And it seems like a blog would work well for that only because it's organized chronologically.
I'm going to steal that actually. What do you think about that? Because I'm concerned about the class interaction, discussions learning, and reflective learning is very important. So what I'm hearing is maybe encouraging the students to come and summarize and reflect upon group closure as a group. And I love that. I'm going to steal that. Thank you. That's my big aha for yes, exactly. And I am thinking about blogs, maybe for the lesson, the subsector lessons, maybe being a weekly lesson to read. I don't remember to do that just yet. A good reminder, I don't have to find this quickly, but on the one of the screenshots from Prof Hacker, I'll have to show you this. I did a screen capture days ago and just grabbed that. And yesterday I was kind of running through things were working. I noticed this, and this is a guy who blogs, who blogs are a central part of his classes. I am sick of student blogging, and that there's just something about, oh, okay, it's not just me. That all of these, they have their own challenges and their own limitations. And if you do it often enough, I could see where the part of the design and tired wikis is I've been doing it for too many years. It's the same kind of thing. There was just something oddly comforting about seeing this guy who is kind of one of the leading blogging and education role models saying, I'm sick of it. Any other comments, questions, Stan?
Yeah, the blog I keep started from class where we were to keep a journal to examine our education, thoughts of education, and theories and all that. And rather than just do a journal that was just a discussion between the professor and
Thank you for that. And that was my experience as well, not specifically, my version of reflection for class, but my big blog, I have 2 blogs, my big blog was a class assignment for Kristen. And she gave me that option. Yes, I am being that Nancy. She gave me that option. And in lieu of Twitter and Facebook, one of the things I did was set up a blog. And and that was it, that blog, which has a global following, started as a chance that a faculty member gave me to communicate in that format. And I haven't thought about it. I do want, because I don't want to, my journal assignment is, still not sure
Well,
where that, but
I think providing the option.
yeah, that's what, yeah.
To write for a global audience, potentially global audience, really makes you think about it, right?
Yeah. And I do think that options in terms of you can do this in a blog, you can do this via audio or whatever, increasing those options for doing that might reduce some of the challenges that some of my students have with reflecting assignments. I still haven't been happy.
That scholarship doesn't accommodate for the size, I noticed you have the size, it doesn't wrap text.
No, this is just a screen capture. That's just a screen capture. The style, yeah. In the Wiki environment, it moves. It's a web page, and so it moves. Like some will move better. Yeah, it moves. Yeah, because it's a web page, and that's one of the nice things about some of the simple accessibility things are kind of built in. So you don't have to, students don't have to think about that. Some of the basic things are there.
And you can't attach anything to these, right?
You can embed documents.
So,
and oh sure, yeah. I don't think I have an example.
like the students could write stuff and then have an audio.
Oh sure. Yeah, you can just embed the MP3 file. And Wiki Spaces handles embedded files a little bit better than PB Works, at least as of my last experience with PB Works. That may be shifting. You can embed any kind of a file like that into. You can embed YouTube, or you can embed a video file. You can embed, although there are limits and size limits on free version of Wiki Spaces, but you can do that and you can embed it. I don't think I have a specific example that I can get to quickly. But one of my online handouts, I do that. Yeah, you can do that, and it handles it fairly. Wiki Spaces, as I said, handles it a little bit better than PB Works. In the resources, I give some suggested tools if you want to get started. I gave you some examples of just kind of basic tools. If you really want to go pro, you can download Wikimedia for wikis. If you really want to go pro, WordPress would be the place to go if you want something a little bit, I gave you a range of options. For wikis, I gave you 2 free hosted sites. Because if you really want to go all out on wikis, talk to Stan about Wikimedia. But in terms of just free stuff, I gave you a couple sites. And then I gave you 3 different friendly options, including WordPress for starting a blog. Okay?
Yeah, you talked a lot about wikis in your classroom and for student projects, but it can also be very powerful for an instructor to be able to pull resources and build pages that you can just continuously refer to a variety of classes, and kind of flesh out your knowledge base on a topic.
So what I was going to talk about is the power of wikis and blogs to create a community of practice. And I think that the power comes from the fact that it's not a course shelf that's behind a login, but it's actually public. And it's like public interaction. And the fact that both Debbie and Stan, in a doctoral level course, obviously they're super engaged in what they're doing and want to talk to other people in their field or in their field of study, maintained a blog after a course ended. That shows the potential for engagement that I think is really, really interesting. I see that with some of my colleagues at other universities are using Facebook groups. Actually, I think we have people here using Facebook groups, but somebody I know at University of Illinois who teaches in a graduate program uses a Facebook group and finds that her students remain in that group and maintain those conversations after the semester ends. And it becomes this community of practice, and it becomes this place that you go to for professional advice or for research advice or to just exchange ideas and talk about things. So that's really cool to see when people are really engaging, and these tools are useful that way.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to share something that I did with my online courses. When the institution I was at, Blackboard 9 came out, it had included in it a blog option. Now, I've been struggling for years with, I have these discussions, student discussions by their very nature are peer-to-peer. They're many-to-many communications, which is all very well and good, but it's easy to hijack a conversation. You can have one student who is perhaps a little bit more outgoing takes over the conversation. What I did is I went ahead and I instituted each student having their own blog. Now this is within the course show. They have their blog. The blog now becomes a one-to-many communication because you're putting the student up on the podium. They are the expert now. And you go ahead and query them about what was your aha moment from the readings this week, something along those lines. And they construct 3 or 4 paragraphs. Other people can react to that through the comments, but the very fact that we're talking one-to-many, they're the content expert, and everyone else is reacting to it. So it puts the student in a slightly different position when they're in the discussions. Worked out very well for me.
Ooh, thank you. Thank you. That's marvelous. I'll turn back over to Christy.